it was so bad.
It was hard back, 20 years ago. And was it 20 already?
28.
20, yeah. And life goes on, and you go through your day, and you think about you think about it all the time. The situation rolls through your mind, and you put it aside. But then, lately, it's been a lot more in the limelight, and so it just brings all those feelings. They're very raw, and I can see it with my mom, with my sister, who are more involved than I am. But I'm quietly raw inside, and it just digs it up when we have these situations.
It was horribly traumatic for me when it happened, because I was part of that family for a good deal of time. Lyle and Eric and I have more of a brother-sister relationship, and it was originally Kitty and I had a mother-daughter kind of relationship that I adored. She was my mentor, but then things changed, and it's really hard to wrestle with that, because I had admired her deeply, and then the last time I was living with them, things had drastically changed already, even then, and that was in 1982, 83.
So you said you were living with the Menendez family for.
Yes.
How did that all work out? How did that come about?
Well, when my sister got married on August 18th, 1973, a lot of our family came from other places, including Kitty and Jose and Lyle and Eric, and we were at the public swimming pool, and I had heard such great things about Kitty and Jose from my grandmother. My grandmother May, my mom's mom. And so I asked her if I could sometime come and stay with them, and she said that she would ask Jose. And then when we were dropping them off at the airport, she leaned into the car and said, "I talked to Jose," and he said yes. So I looked for it. It was like 2 years later that I actually went. And it was between my junior and senior year of high school.
Okay.
I was 16 when I got there, and then I was 17. Lyle was 8, and Eric was 6, I believe.
Are you all watching the miniseries right now that's on?
Well, yeah. Well, Pete and I binged watched it because I just could not sit and watch it on a weekly basis like it was on just a show on TV, because it just hits me too hard. And so we binge watch it, and it's a little easier for me that way. I can cope with the emotions of it, but it's difficult.
And it's very true.
It is. They're doing an amazing job of trying to get out the truth, unlike the movies that were made many years ago.
Yeah, fantasy.
So in a way, because there's been so many misconceptions, and that this actually does sort of.
Cathartic.
It is.
It is. I have the overwhelming feeling of finally they're starting to talk about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Were you worried?
I trusted Dick Wolf's production. I just in talking to his people, I trusted it. And the fact that they wanted to get the truth really impressed me.
When you watch this, are there things that you are realizing that you never knew before, or things that you always knew but were surprised are being told now?
I don't think anything has surprised me. I think, even as truthful as it is, I still think it's a little on the soft side.
I do too.
I don't think it's as horrific as what it really was.
There's so much that they couldn't get in.
You know, the emotions of it are so intense.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's just so intense because of our connection, or if other people that watch it feel that intensity.
We've spoken to Lyle, and Joan, I know you've spoken to Lyle. How is he doing as this is moving
Remarkably
forward?
Well. And Diane talks to him every day.
Almost every day.
They really are like brother and sister.
When we first spoke with him, he had gone in with some trepidation about having this come out once again in the headlines. And is he feeling Like, okay,
Oh,
this
he
is.
is. He's
Oh, good.
he is so appreciative and just almost like he can't believe it that it's finally getting told the correct way.
Is there something that you hope that people take away from this?
Well, I can speak to that
Please.
because I think that you need to pay attention to your kids. I'm sorry.
And
My sister could have protected her kids. That was her job. And I guess she got beaten down herself or something, but because she did deteriorate as we talked weekly on the telephone, I could see she became more cynical as time went on. But I had no idea what was going on. She kept it so hidden. And so I just want parents to know, pay attention to what's going on and let somebody know. If you see something, say something. And because what they went through, no kids should have to live through. I mean, people thought the rich kids, they were
just trying to survive.
It was a
They were
facade.
so afraid of, I mean, they believed their God, their dad was like God. If he said something and when he said, well, I'll kill you, you'll die, they believed it wholeheartedly.
He was a scary guy.
Oh,
Boy,
yes, more so than even I understood. There's an article that I wish everyone could read that was in the New York Post, December 13th, 1993. And in it, Bob Rand interviewed a madam who Jose used to order escorts from, and he would want them to be 13 years old. And he would abuse the escorts, and it got to the point where she stopped taking his calls because he was so abusive to the escorts. She would say, send him. But there's a whole article about it under Menendez murders, I think. And it really is powerful as to speaking to how much of a pedophile and a sick pedophile, it's kind of synonymous.
Tell me what she was like as with you all as siblings. And
she was a little tomboy. She played with the neighbors that she had to play with were the couple of boys.
Growing up, you all sort of were one close family?
I can't say that.
Mm-mm.
My dad left home when Kitty was 3 years old, but he came back repeatedly.
Is that a good thing?
He came back because
Came back to see my mom for sex. And Kitty kept that from me for years. Because I moved out when I was 18. I got married at 17. And I didn't know that for the next 20. Kitty told me late after I was in Arizona, she said, well, this is what's been going on. And that had to affect her, too.
Sure.
And my brother was 4 years old. Kitty was 3. My brother that just passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
And my dad took him from my mother under false pretenses. He had gotten in some kid trouble at 7 years old, and my dad told my mom that the police said, if you don't let me take him, he's going to go to a reform school. Well, she didn't want that to happen, so she let my dad take him. But that wasn't true. That never really happened. So he ran away from my dad when he was 16. So, and he abused my other brother, Milton, who was 11 when he left home. But Milton was abused by my dad.
Physically beaten?
Physically he was abused, and emotionally. Milton only ever wanted my dad's approval, and he did it. He was Special Forces, Green Beret. He did everything.
But he also ended up being an abusive man.
An abuser to his family, seriously abusing. And so it just goes on.
It's a cycle.
So it was hardly a happy Midwestern family.
And when
Was Kitty damaged by this? I mean, as she moved forward, did she have bouts of depression then?
No.
Is there any issues? Was she, by all intents and purposes, what we've read is that she was this very vivacious.
She could do anything. She was strong. She painted my mom's house. She could make clothes. She could cover furniture. She was, and she was strong, but I think after she met Jose, and she had gone to college for communication and television work and everything, and planned to work in the field. And after she got married and had Lyle, Jose let her know that she wasn't going to go to work doing that. So I'm sure that her life's ambition went out the window, and she was relegated. And
But she always had a harsh ambition, and the Anderson need to have everything look good, and
yeah,
I remember before we moved from Chicago, things that she said to me that I felt were very harsh and too harsh for my age.
like appearances matter.
Appearances matter, and one day she was on the roof putting shingles on the roof at Grandma's house, and I had this new outfit on, and I was 6 years old, and somebody had told me it looked cute on me. So I went in the backyard, and we all looked up to Aunt Kitty. She was vivacious. She had to laugh like Diane's. Diane's laugh is quite a bit like Aunt Kitty's. And you would just, hear it, and Aunt Kitty, it would just draw you to her. But I went in the backyard, and I said, oh, look, I have this cute outfit on. And she came down off the roof, off the ladder, to yell at me, tell me that you don't compliment yourself, and just crushed my spirit. So, that epitomized to me how my behavior was with her after that.
Going along with what my mom was saying, as far as her ambitions for television and being a cameraman, and she had her own radio program on campus while she was in college.
Mm-hmm.
Her dream was to go into Broadway and theater, and she still, in 1976, she was still very vibrant and still believed that could happen for her. And over the years, that disappeared, and she was very resentful for it, that she was not able to pursue her career. One time I was helping her make a bed, and this was in 1982, and her bed, and the kids were just off to the side of us, and I started talking about having kids. She stopped me cold and said, no, never have children. They only serve to drive a wedge between a man and his wife.
When Jose came into the picture, was he a welcome addition?
Not for very long, as soon as he started making money. Now, they came to Arizona in 1963, before they had kids, and I've reflected recently and remembered we went to a restaurant in Scottsdale somewhere. It was a nice restaurant, and that was my first experience with him, that he was so rude to the waitstaff just because he could. That was embarrassing. And I thought, wow, I wasn't used to that. My husband was a very polite, courteous person, and I never saw anything like that before.
Did he intimidate you as girls?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was very intimidating.
Yeah.
Very intimidating, and he would laugh you out of a conversation if he could. Belittling, very belittling.
Yeah, I was going to say he was.
And that would
he could
especially
humiliate.
true. He did it to both his children and to adults, but he really was hard on Eric, as far as belittling him and laughing at him.
Especially on the tennis court during practices and tournaments that I saw.
Everything.
I think he was that way with everybody. At one of the memorial services in Princeton, one of his I don't say co-workers, nobody was a co-worker, but worked under him, got talking to me, a couple of guys did, and said he would, this was a memorial service, people were sorry that this had happened, but he took the time to tell me that he would call me meetings and point out to one guy and say, watch him, watch what I'm going to do to him. He'll be weeping before he leaves.
As the marriage continued and the boys were born, was it happy times in the beginning? Was the household ever a joyous place to be?
My mother would go to visit regularly, and she came back because they were doing well. financially, and the boys were doing well with their tennis, but nobody knew what was beneath the surface.
I don't remember that ever being, like, we grew up middle class. We didn't have extra this or that. But there was a lot of laughing going on in our house, and I don't remember that kind of thing being in my memory whenever they would visit, or it was always
That's
very
true.
tense. It was very regimented. It was much different than what I was used to, and always a sense that something was wrong. I always had that sense about them.
You know, I've got myself and my sister-in-law and a former daughter-in-law. We all had the same experiences with that family. After Eric would have a tennis match, and they were staying at a local hotel in Scottsdale. And this is so identical in telling it that Jose would go into Eric always had his own room, and Jose would go into that room, and he'd be there at least an hour, and we would be waiting in the master suite, and Jose would come out finally, and he'd say, well, let's go to dinner. Eric doesn't feel like eating, or Eric isn't hungry. But I said that, and my sister-in-law told me that, and my former daughter-in-law told me the same story, and she thought it was unique to her. So I thought, this is...
It was a rule. Whenever Jose was with one of his boys, especially Eric, you were not allowed to go onto that floor. Their bedrooms were upstairs, and then there was a main floor and then a basement. And if Jose was upstairs with Eric, no one, including Kitty, was allowed to go even up to the floor. We had to wait until Jose came back downstairs. And more often than not, he would say, Eric doesn't feel well right now, he'll come down later. How many times does a kid not feel well?
Did something go through your mind at that point that something was going on, or was just out of the realm of possibility?
At the time, and I don't think that anybody did, we didn't question Jose.
I began to, though, as I got older, and when they had moved to California, I had hoped that I could become close to Kitty again, because with them living on the East Coast, I didn't get to see them as often. So I would come over and visit once in a while, short visits, never anything like Diane did. And something was not right, and I had been in an abusive marriage, and some of the behaviors that were going on in that house were things that just raised red flags and made my stomach go into knots, and just wasn't right. And
An example, Karen. Tell me something that you noticed.
just like Diane said, after the meals, Eric would disappear up into his room, or he would go off with Jose, and they would just have these quiet talks that were very tense, and I would start to go that way, and Kitty would say, no, you need to leave them alone. And it would be just very awkward, and they'd come back, and Eric would just seem browbeat and sad, and I would try my damnedest to get Kitty and Eric to talk to me on all those visits, and they wouldn't say anything. Turned out that my gut instincts were correct, and I think that's, as like Mom said earlier, my whole intent in speaking out, all these years I just keep thinking, if I had pushed them a little harder, if I had asked the right question, or asked it in a different way, or asked it when Jose wasn't in the house, or, just what could I have done to have gotten them to speak up and tell me what was going on? And I don't know what I would have done, but I would have done something. And I feel so strongly about wanting people to pay attention if they think something's going on. push it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But if you're right, you might save a situation like this.
Did you get the sense that when that Lyle or Eric ever wanted to say something to you?
I did.
Did they ever come close?
I think Eric came close one day in the backyard after I had made a dinner, and Jose terribly belittled me, and I don't want to get into all that, I can, but I asked Eric if he wanted to go out and back and talk, and he took his guitar and we went out and back, and he played guitar a little bit and sang a song that he had written, I think, and but he was just quiet. He was so quiet and so he was just so quiet. I just couldn't draw him out very much, and he would look like he was going to look at me and say something, and then he wouldn't. And finally he's like, well, we better go in. And we went in, and Kitty and Jose were sitting on the couch where they always sat. And as soon as we got in that house, boy, they wanted to know, what did you talk about? And just grilled me on, like, what did you talk? I was like, nothing. He played a song. Really, we didn't talk about anything. And Jose took Eric aside, and what did you guys talk about? And kept asking, and I was like, we didn't talk about anything. And they said, well, it's, time for Eric to go to bed, and you need to go wrap it up.
And what about Lyle and all of this?
Lyle told me in 1976 that he and his dad had been touching each other. My bedroom was in the basement. I had 2 twin beds.
This is the dramatization that we saw on the show?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about what happened.
It wasn't exactly the way they portrayed it, but it got the information out. I had 2 twin beds in my bedroom downstairs in the basement. And he came downstairs one night towards the end of my stay, so it would have been like August. And he wanted to sleep on the other bed that I wasn't using because his dad and him had been touching each other down there. And he indicated his genital. And I went to get Kitty upstairs. And then she came directly back downstairs again, and he had already gotten in the bed in the meantime. And she took him by the arm and just took him right back upstairs and never said another word about it.
He told you, showed you? Tell me again exactly what he had said to you.
I'm not sure, can I sleep in this bed? My dad and I have been touching each other down there.
And what was your...
Well, I couldn't believe it, and then after Kitty reacted the way she did, I thought I was making more of it than it really was, and just to find out that I didn't understand it enough, how bad it was. And I guess Lyle told his mom after that, he told her directly himself. And nothing was ever done. Although I do, from the trial, I understand that it did stop shortly after that time for him. But then that would have been when it started for Eric.
Diane, how did Kitty treat you after that?
It got worse and worse. She would go into these fierce rages where her teeth are just gritting you like this, and her hands are up in her fists, and she would be this close to her, especially to Lyle and Eric. She'd get this close to their face and just scream and yell at them, and she'd be saying, "I hate you. I wish you were never born. Idiot, stupid. You ruined my marriage."
Was she on pills? Was there
She had
alcohol?
started to drink more, yes. There were specific
She was
drinks.
taking
And she was taking,
sedatives
she was,
and-
yeah, she
You
was
said
taking.
in the morning?
Yeah, she would put it in her coffee in the morning, even. And she was drinking more and more. And there had just been a really drastic change. And I asked Sylvia, who is the oldest daughter of Terry and Carlos Peralt, one night we went for a walk, and I shared with her how much Kitty had changed. And the only thing she said she could think of was that in the interim between my visits, Kitty had found out that Jose was having an affair. I believe it was with his secretary, that one. And he went on to have several other affairs throughout their marriage.
She really loved her husband.
Yeah.
Was she afraid of her husband? Was she intimidated by her husband, or was she just madly in love with him and his
I
world?
think that she was afraid of her future.
Well
I
said.
think she was raised to believe by my mother that she was going to marry well, get educated, and know her trade, marry well.
That's very important to the
It was very
Anderson
important,
family.
very important. And when this came tumbling down, I'm sure that this is all she thought of all her life, which is this is what's going to happen, because she was told and she believed it.
She asked me one time when we were on our way home, it was just the two of us in the car, how I was coping with having broken up with my ex-boyfriend at the time. And I said, okay. And then she shared with me, well, you know, I was going to marry this other man, and then I ended up marrying Jose, and I guess I made the right choice because look how much money Jose makes. That was her reason for being in the marriage.
She had pills, you said. She was drinking starting in the morning. And so were you noticing in the last years that her behavior, when you spoke to her, Joan, did you speak to her frequently?
Yes, she called me regularly, but most of the time I realized after the fact that it was she knew I wouldn't know the difference. She would tell me anything she wanted to, and I lived in the mountains in Arizona, and she was in New York until she was told by her sister-in-law, you better get yourself to California, because her sister-in-law knew that Jose was having affairs. But she would tell me things that Jose was, to make it look like Jose was so faithful that he has board meetings with all these guys and they talk about all their affairs, and Jose doesn't have anything to compare it to.
Yes.
One of the interesting things that I remember from my conversation with Lyle was that, you know, when he talks about his parents in retrospect, the way that he had put his father on a pedestal, but he really saves the disappointment, if that's the correct word, for his mother, that she would she would sacrifice her children for her husband.
That's why that was my point. That's what I was trying to get at. No mother should do that, no matter what. You're there to protect your kids.
She resented them terribly.
She was a different woman
She didn't know how, apparently.
from when I was a little girl and we moved with Diane in the back seat of the car from Chicago.
She was in a porta crib in the back seat, and Kitty rode side with.
People didn't even use seatbelts then. But she was always a tough woman. Tough woman. But
Oh, she was remarkable.
a different woman.
Was she ever a good mom?
No,
I don't think so.
Were the boys part of the perfect family that you're supposed to have that was creating that?
The facade, it was a great
They
facade.
weren't allowed to have friends.